I was falsely accused of cheating by the school's heartthrob, and on my birthday, my childhood friend brought him to reconcile. We've been classmates. There's no need to hold a grudge. Indeed, there was no need. So I threw away her birthday gift, destroyed everything related to her, and completely withdrew from her world. I intended to have nothing more to do with her. Yet, at a business banquet years later, she spotted me in the crowd at a glance. In front of everyone, my childhood friend, who was surrounded by admiration, had tears in her eyes. Was it fun? You've been avoiding me for 7 whole years. Chapter 1. During the break, the classroom entrance was crowded with people, all craning their necks to look inside. In just one break, the news of Santiago from Class 3 falsely accusing a classmate of cheating had spread throughout the entire school. Santiago stood by the desk with a stern expression, the desk kicked into a skewed position. Many people surrounded him with comfort, but their gazes kept shifting to me. I was the classmate who had been falsely accused. Santiago is the class president. Maybe he misjudged the situation in the interest of order. Everyone makes mistakes. It's just a misunderstanding, not something unforgivable, right? As soon as these words were spoken, many others nodded in agreement. Looking over at me, they were all waiting for me to step up and comfort Santiago. Meeting their expectant gazes, my heart sank. The feeling of being ostracized welled up again. The school had classes divided by academic performance, and Class 3, being the top class in the entire grade, was where I had fought hard to get into. Santiago had always had a good reputation, handsome, warm-hearted, and famously the school heartthrob. Everyone usually pretended to be united, showing a facade of camaraderie, but when real issues arose, not a single person stood up for someone like me, who had transferred in halfway. I bit my lip, unwilling to back down. Santiago owes me an apology. They wanted to say more, but Santiago suddenly looked up at me. His face was dark, and his tone was harsh to the extreme. Fine. It was my fault. I shouldn't have spoken up for the sake of the class and discipline. I'm sorry. Is that enough, Bruno? His attitude was filled with extreme reluctance. Before I could respond, he suddenly stood up and walked out of the classroom. Then, a burst of exclamations came from outside. Sensing something was wrong, I followed him out of the classroom and saw Santiago surrounded by a group of people. He was bent over, holding his ankle, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, his face pale. Voices filled my ears. Santiago's parents just had a car accident, and he's been emotionally unstable. Does he really need to be pushed this far? I can't believe it. Is an apology really that important? The area around me cleared out, and I stood there in confusion. I looked up and met the gaze of Julieta, who had just come out of the office. Julieta had beautiful eyes, usually cold when looking at others, but with me, there was always a touch of warmth. But now, those eyes were filled with obvious reproach. In an instant, I understood. Julieta was blaming me too. Chapter 2. Santiago momentarily lost his footing and stumbled on the stairs. Julieta immediately helped him to the infirmary. With his arm resting on Julieta's shoulder, Santiago coldly met my gaze, his expression filled with mockery. It was indeed mockery. In that instant, it felt as though he had seen right through me. Santiago had seen through my unspoken feelings for Julieta. I was utterly convinced that the accusation was intentional. After returning from the infirmary, Julieta came to find me. The evening breeze tousled the ends of her hair as she leaned on the railing, turning her head to look at me. Is it really that important to you? Just a single word. Her tone was as usual. Nothing seemed different, but I could sense it. She was blaming me, just like everyone else. A lump formed in my throat, rendering me speechless. After a long pause, I lowered my eyes to meet hers, forcing a bitter smile. I don't understand. How did his act of playing the victim turn me into the one who did something wrong? Julieta looked at me, stunned for a second. Perhaps my bitter smile was too much to bear. As the tension in Julieta's expression eased, what act? He really hurt his ankle. And besides, I never said you were wrong. Julieta averted her gaze. I just think there's no need to make a big deal out of it. The school bell rang urgently, each chime sinking my heart further and further. I stood still, quietly watching Julieta, and an inexplicable feeling of betrayal washed over me. Was it really about not making a big deal, or was it something else? Chapter 3. By the time school ended, Julieta was gone. Santiago's seat was also empty. Someone told me that Julieta had something to do and asked me to head home on my own. I nodded and replied with an "oh," feeling a mix of emotions that I couldn't quite name. On the way home, groups of people walked together, laughing and chatting. I rode my bike with my head down, and for some reason, memories started flooding back. In our old neighborhood, Julieta's name was well known. Everyone knew that although Julieta had a cold temperament, she was fiercely protective. Whenever I got into an argument with someone, Julieta would always be the first to rush to my side. Without even knowing the details, I lost my parents at a young age and was raised by my grandmother in that old neighborhood. Julieta often followed me around, calling me big brother this and big brother that, but gradually, she awkwardly started avoiding those terms. She began calling me by my full name, Bruno Lou. I would lazily look at her as I carried her school bag. Your wings have hardened, and now you dare to call me by my name. It was as if she had been caught. She would lower her head and mumble, "What big brother? You're only a few days older than me." As if deliberately defying me, she puffed up her cheeks and shouted at me, "I'll just call you Bruno, 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 Bruno." Julieta thought I would scold her like I used to, so she turned and ran away quickly, but I didn't. I stood there for a long while, resigned, and said, all right, I can't control you anymore." Then I chuckled softly, just as well. I never liked being called big brother. By the time I came back to my senses, the sky had already turned dark. The distance between school and home wasn't far, but during that walk, I must have turned around 108 times like a spinning top. On the dimly lit path, there was never a familiar figure in sight. Chapter 4. The next day, Julieta waited for me to walk to school together as usual. It seemed like nothing had changed, but on the way, I couldn't help but casually ask Julieta why she came back so late yesterday. Julieta nonchalantly explained that something had come up. She didn't give a reason, but I quickly found out why. As soon as I entered the classroom, I saw Santiago look up and smile at Julieta. "Good morning, Julieta. By the way, thanks for walking me home yesterday." I froze in place, slowly looking up at Santiago. He had a handsome smile, but I had never found a smile so irritating. I had heard about it before I transferred to Class 3. Santiago and Julieta were quite close. I wanted to act like I didn't care, but I couldn't fool myself. I cared a lot. So that something Julieta mentioned was walking Santiago home. I pressed my lips together, feeling a sudden surge of anger. I didn't speak to Julieta for the entire day. During a break, Santiago suddenly approached me and placed a cup of water on my desk. I turned my head, but before I could react, there was a shattering sound. Suddenly, Santiago's voice echoed through the classroom. A lot of people turned to look, and the room instantly fell into an awkward silence. Santiago's face darkened, and he stared at the broken cup on the floor in disbelief. His voice irritated. "I just wanted to apologize for the other day, man." The cup had shattered into pieces. Water splashed everywhere. Santiago took a deep breath and turned to me helplessly. Let's just say I didn't hold it properly. But the more he explained, the more attention fell on me. I was all too familiar with the meaning behind those looks. I looked at Santiago, and it suddenly all made sense. It was the same old trick. I hated being falsely accused more than anything. In the brief pause as Santiago feigned helplessness, I suddenly grabbed him and started heading towards the teacher's office. "Stop pretending. I didn't even touch the cup. Let's go check the security footage." Santiago froze for a second, his face turning pale. He refused to go. It caused quite a scene. After a few steps, someone suddenly stopped me. "That's enough." I frowned and looked down, only to see Julieta's face. It was like a bucket of ice water had been poured over me. I was chilled to the bone. Julieta hadn't spoken to me all day, but the first thing she said was to defend Santiago. I knew very well that Santiago was doing all this because of Julieta. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of impatience and helplessness. "Don't make a scene. It's almost time for class." There it was again, that dismissive attitude, just a few casual words, and she sided with Santiago. The anger that had been simmering since last night flared up uncontrollably. My face darkened instantly, and I shoved Julieta slightly. "Julieta, do you think this is funny? Why should I keep letting Santiago slander me? Are you going to say it's unnecessary again this time?" "Yes, it doesn't matter to you, but it's very important to me." My sudden outburst stunned Julieta for a couple of seconds. She stared at me blankly, as if she hadn't expected such a strong reaction from me. After a while, she blinked and choked out, "That's not what I meant." Chapter 5. I insisted on checking the security footage, but Santiago tried to stop me. I dropped it by accident. No need to bother the teacher over something so trivial. The way things were, anyone could see the problem wasn't with me. Many of the people who had defended Santiago before didn't speak up this time. I sat back down, feeling extremely irritated. Julieta handed me a bottle of cold water, her eyes downcast as she looked at me. "Bruno, that's not what I meant." I ignored her. For the next few days, Julieta stayed close to me. We rarely fought, but after school, I turned and walked away, and it seemed like Julieta had finally had enough. She suddenly grabbed my sleeve. Her hand was cold, and there was a new, expensive watch on her wrist. It was the same watch I had glanced at a couple of times online. Too expensive for me to even think of buying. Even for someone like Julieta, who came from a well-off family, it wasn't something she would buy lightly. I froze in place, looking at Julieta as she gazed up at me. "Please don't be mad at me, okay?" Without thinking, I tried to take it off and return it to her. but Julieta stopped me. I wanted to give it to you anyway, but it's not your birthday yet, so it's a bit early. I still kept a stern face, but I could feel my anger fading away. When I got home, I cursed myself for being so spineless. Just as I finished, the phone suddenly rang. My aunt's voice came through the line, asking if I had thought about transferring schools and when I planned to move. I stared at the watch on my wrist and quietly said, I want to stay a little longer. Since my grandmother passed away, the only reason I stayed here was Julieta. For the next few days, Julieta didn't mention Santiago in front of me. I thought we were done with him, but then, on my birthday, I heard something. Julieta had been hanging out with Santiago every day after school, taking walks together. My heart sank in an instant. Chapter 6. Thunder rumbled across the sky. It rained heavily on my birthday. Julieta was supposed to pick up the cake, but she had something come up last minute and asked me to get it. I wanted to ask her for more details over the phone, but she hung up quickly. I reassured myself that I could ask her in person when we met. After picking up the cake, I stepped outside only to find that the rain had gotten even heavier. To make matters worse, my car had broken down. The place where Julieta had planned the party wasn't too far. I held an umbrella in one hand and carried the cake in the other as I hurried towards the location, but I still ended up getting quite wet. It was rare for Julieta to ask me to pick up the cake myself on my birthday. She probably had something more important to deal with. I kept comforting myself with this thought until I reached the door, but from the room, I distinctly heard Santiago's voice. I froze in place, listening to his voice drift out from the entrance. With a hint of laughter, he said, "Thanks to our Julie for agreeing to pick me up in this heavy rain." The door was slightly ajar. I stood there for a second, numbly lifting my gaze, only to find that everyone else had already arrived. There were even some unfamiliar faces present. In the crowd, I saw the one person I least wanted to see. It wasn't my imagination. Santiago was really there. Someone must have noticed me because a voice called out, and suddenly, all eyes were on me. My disheveled appearance was laid bare for everyone to see, and for a moment, the room fell into an awkward silence. Santiago turned to look as well, standing calmly beside Julieta. His clothes were clean and neat. In stark contrast to me, water dripped from my sleeves. I stood there, soaked, holding the cake in front of everyone. I felt like a clown with nowhere to hide. I had never felt so humiliated before. Anger churned inside me as I looked at Julieta, gritting my teeth. I asked her, "Why is Santiago here?" Julieta hadn't expected me to be in such a state, and her face changed immediately. I felt my fury trapped in my chest, ready to explode with a single word. I stared at Julieta without moving, repeating my question. "Why is Santiago here? Have you been with him all these days? Did you come here with him today too?" Santiago had arrived perfectly dry, and on my birthday, I was the laughingstock, drenched and humiliated in front of everyone. Julieta knew how much I disliked Santiago. I had said it more than once. I didn't want to see Santiago anymore. Why did it have to be today? Why did it have to be when I was at my lowest? Julieta stood there, stunned. She hurriedly tried to explain. "Santiago said he wanted to formally apologize to you today, and he invited a lot of people to witness it. He even prepared a birthday gift. So I thought." Julieta suddenly grabbed my wrist tightly. "I wanted to clear up the misunderstanding today. Santiago is really a good guy. There's no need to hold a grudge." No need. There it was again. No need. Indeed, there was no need. I looked at Julieta, silently prying her fingers off my wrist. Then I removed the watch from my wrist and tossed it to her. This time, I didn't press her with questions or say anything at all. Something I had held onto for so long suddenly didn't seem worth it anymore. The day I left, I didn't tell Julieta. It was just an ordinary afternoon when I put a definitive end to things with Julieta. Chapter 7. My aunt helped me with the transfer paperwork. She mentioned that when my name was brought up, a girl suddenly rushed out of class, choking back tears. She repeatedly asked where I had transferred to. My aunt asked me if she was a good friend. I shook my head and smiled. Not anymore. My aunt didn't tell Julieta. Julieta wouldn't be able to find me. Chapter 8. Bruno. How can you be so relaxed? Aren't you nervous? The boss said that tonight's banquet is going to be packed with all the big names in the industry. My colleague David's voice snapped me back to reality. The banquet hall before me was lively, brilliantly lit, and incredibly luxurious. 7 years had passed since I transferred schools. After transferring, I threw myself completely into my studies with no distractions. I exceeded expectations in the college entrance exams. After graduating from university, I smoothly entered this company, snapping out of my thoughts. I paused for a second. Don't worry. There's nothing for small fry like us to stress over. You're calling yourself a small fry. You climbed to a position in 3 years that most people can't reach in 10. Just as he finished speaking, a sudden commotion arose at the front of the hall. In the midst of it, I seemed to catch a few mentions of Miss Lou. David swallowed nervously beside me. Miss Lu, she's a rich heiress. Not only is her family wealthy, but she's also running her own company successfully. And she's here? I slowly furrowed my brows. Something clicked in my mind. I looked up. All I could see was a beautiful figure surrounded by people. The simple yet elegant custom-made dress she wore was clearly expensive at a glance. That profile was overwhelmingly familiar. Bruno. A voice shattered all my thoughts. There were many people around her, trying to engage in conversation, but her gaze pierced through the crowd, locking onto me. In front of everyone, she even started walking toward me, step by step. Was it fun? Julieta stared at me, her eyes red, avoiding me for these entire 7 years. Chapter 9. The hall fell silent, and almost every gaze was fixed on me. There were whispers, people sizing me up. Everyone was trying to figure out how someone like me, a small-time employee, could be connected to Julieta. I looked down helplessly and met Julieta's gaze. She seemed to have changed over the years, yet somehow hadn't changed at all. Gone was the youthful innocence. After years of navigating society, she now exuded an aura that made her hard to approach. The Julieta of today was someone most people would go out of their way to say a few nice words to. I took a step back, increasing the distance between us, and quietly observed her. After all these years, I felt the same as I did 7 years ago. There wasn't much I wanted to say. Perhaps my retreat was too obvious. As Julieta suddenly froze in place, she looked up at me, her voice choking. Are you still going to avoid me? The boss stood not far away, blinking rapidly as if pressing a camera shutter, his hints painfully clear. Over the years, I had dealt with many people, and saying the right words for the occasion had become second nature. But I didn't want to play along in front of Julieta. I simply asked her, what status do you have that makes you worth avoiding? At my words, many faces in the room changed. Julieta's expression also paled slightly. What status? Julieta stared at me, a mix of unwillingness and hurt in her eyes. She wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes and softly asked me, Bruno, do you want me to help you remember? Chapter 10. Remember what? Remember how she so clearly sided with Santiago that year? Or remember that miserable birthday in the pouring rain? The feelings of humiliation and frustration that I had buried deep inside began to resurface. Suppressing my emotions, I let out a couple of cold laughs and spoke with a trace of bitterness. Julieta. I looked up at her, genuinely asking, and who exactly are you to me? Chapter 11. Julieta had likely been riding high on her successes over the years, elevated by those around her. She frowned, her anger evident in her eyes. Those eyes glared at me fiercely, but when she spoke, her voice was hoarse. Say that again. The atmosphere grew tense. The boss seized the moment, stepping in front of me and discreetly pushing me out of the way. The cold wind outside cooled my emotions. I hadn't expected to still get angry because of Julieta. David caught up to me, handing me a bottle of water and speaking nervously. Miss Lu just now looked really scary. How do you know her? The cool sensation of the water sliding down my throat only added to my exhaustion. That's it for tonight. I'm heading back. Let the boss know for me. I had just reached the parking lot when a message from David popped up. You're not here. And Miss Lu left without looking back. Could she be coming after you? My brow furrowed slightly. From behind, I could faintly hear the hurried click of high heels against the ground. Julieta had caught up. She was out of breath from running, her chest heaving as she looked up at me, feeling wronged. How could you leave without saying anything? Are you planning to disappear quietly again? I stared at her silently, with no intention of speaking. But my calm demeanor seemed to ignite something in Julieta. Her emotions began to crumble. You've been avoiding me for 7 years, and you have nothing to say to me. I corrected her. I wasn't avoiding you. Then why did you leave without a word? Why did you transfer schools without telling me? If I hadn't come looking for you, were you really planning to never see me again? Leaning against the car, I let out a laugh. Who even remembers such old and trivial matters? That one sentence seemed to pierce Julieta deeply. She stared at me, and tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. Don't remember? Bruno, who gave you the right to forget? Her words hit hard, like a heavy blow landing squarely on the heart of the 17-year-old Bruno. I forced a cold laugh from my throat, locking eyes with Julieta. And who gave me the reason to remember? Julieta, who do you think you are? Why should I remember those times of utter humiliation and disgrace? I'm no one. Of course. Julieta's face turned pale as she cried, but I won't let you forget. Not wanting to continue this conversation, I turned to leave, but Julieta blocked my way. I thought I could control my emotions, but seeing Julieta in this self-righteous state, I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. Julieta looked up at me, stubborn and hurt. Do you know how long I've been searching for you? Do you know how happy I was to see you today? She didn't finish her sentence before a loud crashing sound echoed in the quiet parking lot. I turned towards the noise and saw Santiago in the distance, though I hadn't noticed when he arrived. Something had shattered on the ground. Santiago stood frozen, staring straight at us. still holding Julieta's coat. Chapter 12. Santiago had been by Julieta's side all these years. The two of them attended the same university. After graduation, Santiago joined Julieta's company. This time, Julieta hadn't brought him along. He came on his own, wanting to surprise her. He stared at Julieta, his face dark with anger. His current expression reminded me so much of the Santiago from years ago. I looked back at Julieta and let out a sarcastic laugh. The irony was too clear, and Julieta's face turned completely white. Santiago approached. His eyes filled with irritation and disdain as he forced a smile and greeted me. He said, "Long time no see, Bruno. You left school without saying a word back then, making it impossible for me to properly apologize." As he spoke, he naturally hooked his arm around Julieta's, clearly staking his claim. Just like before, it seemed Santiago hadn't changed at all over the years, but this time, before I could respond, Julieta suddenly pulled her arm away. She looked at Santiago, her voice soft as she asked him, "Santiago, didn't I tell you that if you wanted to stay in the company, you should stop saying things you shouldn't?" At her words, Santiago's face turned as white as a sheet, but he still reached out to grab Julieta's wrist. "Julie, are you still mad about last time? I won't do it again. Let's not make a scene. We can talk about it when we get back. Okay." He was terrified that Julieta might say something in front of me. Julieta distanced herself from him, then looked up at me and explained. "Something happened years ago, and Santiago saved my family, so my mother arranged for him to join the company." Enough. Santiago suddenly interrupted, his voice low and strained. "Don't treat me like this. Let's go back." "All right." Julieta ignored him and finished her sentence. I and Santiago were never in a relationship. Chapter 13. Julieta's explanation and Santiago's irritated voice swirled in my mind. The chaotic reunion scene was giving me a headache. They seemed to be saying a lot, but I didn't really take any of it in. All I remember is that when my headache got worse and I tried to leave, Julieta grabbed my wrist. Her fingers gripped tightly. Julieta said that all these years, she had never forgotten me. She then asked me again, what could she do to earn my forgiveness? It's strange, the person I didn't care about back then. How did she end up so deeply invested 7 years later? I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't want to. I pried her hand off and silently mouthed 3 words in front of her. "Stop pretending." After putting some distance between us, I got in my car and drove away without looking back. I didn't want to have anything more to do with them. But early the next morning, the company group chat was buzzing. One explosive message after another popped up. "Wow, whose Porsche is parked by the company entrance? Look at that license plate starting with 777. I saw the owner. She's stunning, but her presence is kind of intimidating. Didn't dare to look twice." The last time the group chat was this lively was when someone's wife publicly confronted a mistress. I sat up abruptly, my sleepiness gone, staring at the screen. A name was on the tip of my tongue. When I got to the company, the Porsche was still parked prominently outside. A lot of people were sneaking glances, gossiping. The owner didn't seem to mind being the center of attention. She leaned against the car, her head down, lost in thought. That familiar profile almost confirmed it for me at first glance. Julieta. As if sensing something, Julieta looked up sharply. She stared at me quietly, expressionless, but usually, this kind of stance meant she wasn't going to let things go easily. She was angry that I had walked away without looking back last night, so she showed up at the company first thing to confront me. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Talk about what?" I found it amusing. "What is there left to talk about between us?" "A lot," Julieta said seriously, looking at me. "There's so much I've wanted to say to you over the years, and what if I say I don't want to hear it?" Julieta looked at me silently for 2 seconds. "You should know, patience is something I have in abundance. Suit yourself." I looked away and walked into the company without another word. Chapter 14. Julieta stayed downstairs the entire time. David and the new female intern kept glancing out the window. "Isn't that Miss Lou? Has she gone crazy? She's not even leaving in the rain." The intern, Camila, leaned over sweetly. "Is she really here for Bruno? She must have done something to make him mad." David took a sip of his coffee. "And you would know." Camila, with an air of understanding, replied, "Of course, Bruno has such a good temper. He rarely refuses anyone. Women can be so wicked." David gave her a strange look. "Aren't you a woman?" "How could I count?" Camila exclaimed. "I would never make Bruno mad. I only feel sorry for him." I glanced outside, where the rain was now falling steadily. The rain was especially cold in late autumn. Julieta stood under an umbrella, her eyes fixed on the building. She stood there alone. I couldn't see her expression clearly, but I could easily imagine it. Always cold, indifferent, with that stubborn streak. It was the same look Julieta used to have whenever she tried to cheer me up after making me upset. Once she set her mind on something, few people could change it. After all these years, Julieta seemed even more persistent than before. I looked away and didn't say anything. It wasn't until night had fully fallen, and everyone had left the office, that I glanced down after finishing my overtime. Julieta was still there. I shut down my computer and left through the back door. Chapter 15. That night, David started a group chat and, together with Camila, they went back and forth, determined to pry open the story between me and Julieta. I was forced to stay up late. After the conversation, while brushing my teeth, the chat suddenly exploded with 999 plus messages, all filled with their concerned comments about Julieta. Before bed, Camila sent me a private message. Bruno, I gave Julieta a piece of my mind. How did I do? Camila always liked to talk big, so I didn't think much of it and just told her to get some sleep. The next day, Julieta still hadn't left. She was determined to stay and play hardball. I glanced over, then smoothly entered the company through the back door. Not long after I got in, there was a sudden commotion inside the company. Even the boss was alerted. David returned, looking conflicted. Julieta, she's something else. I frowned. What did she do? She probably wants to add you on WeChat. Ignore it. Of course I ignored it. David raised his hand and pointed downstairs, but plenty of others didn't. Under my gaze, David finally spoke up. Anyone who gives her your WeChat gets a 100,000 yuan reward. The next second, my phone vibrated. A message from a colleague in the adjacent department appeared. Sorry, Bruno, but she offered too much. My phone buzzed again. Another friend request. It's Julieta. Chapter 16. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. Before I could fully process the situation, there was another burst of commotion. It seemed like the company had used up 3 years' worth of exclamations in just a few days. A flashy sports car had provocatively parked in front of Julieta's Porsche. Gossip always draws a crowd. A bunch of people were leaning out the windows to watch. Who's that now? No idea. Hey, they're getting out of the car. Wait, why does that person look familiar? Isn't that Bruno's new intern, the heiress? My brow furrowed as I looked closely, and sure enough, it was Camila. Camila got out of the car, took off her sunglasses, and gave Julieta a once-over, then let out a sneer and flipped her the middle finger. She seemed to say something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but it definitely wasn't anything nice. I sighed, picked up my phone and headed downstairs. Chapter 17. By the time I got downstairs, the two of them were already at it. I knew very well that Julieta had a bad temper. After years of living in luxury, there was no way she would tolerate a university student provoking her. Camila had a large, bruised cut on the corner of her mouth. She wiped it gently, looked down at me, and spoke in a sweet tone. Bruno, I'm fine. Even if she hit me first. I fought back. Camila hadn't been at the company long and was always protective of her face. I knew she was standing up for me, but I didn't expect it to get this far. A sudden wave of frustration hit me, and I turned coldly to Julieta. Have you had enough? Even if Camila said something, did it really warrant hitting her first? As soon as I finished speaking, Julieta, who had been standing stunned, slowly looked up at me. She seemed more disheveled than I had ever seen her. Her face didn't look much better than Camila's, probably worse. She didn't seem to care about the injury, her pale face filled with shock, hurt, and disbelief. I was the one who hit first. Camila beside me let out a soft, ouch. Don't be mad, Bruno. It's just a little cut. It'll heal in a few days. It doesn't hurt. Let's head back to the company. As I turned to leave, Julieta suddenly grabbed my wrist. She looked at me stubbornly, tears streaming down her face. So you're just going to take her word for it, without even asking me, and assume I hit her first? I shook her hand off. If you want to talk, we can do it after work. Camila turned around and smirked at Julieta. Chapter 18. Julieta stayed until the end of the workday. She just stood there with her bruised face, not getting any treatment, stubbornly waiting until evening. I left the company with Camila. Julieta walked over, about to speak, when Camila suddenly let out another soft ouch. She reached out her hand to me. Bruno, my hand hurts. I don't think I can drive. Seeing that hand, Julieta suddenly felt her face sting. Then, as if realizing something, she took a step forward, looking at me. You promised we would talk. Camila lowered her eyes. I can manage the pain. If you have something to do, it's okay. You don't need to take me home. I looked at Camila. I'll take you home first. Julieta stood frozen, staring at me in shock. The light in her eyes dimmed bit by bit. On the way, Camila confessed to me. Bruno, it was actually me who hit first. She treated you that way before. Now it's her turn to know what it feels like not to be trusted. I understand. I looked at her. But don't use this method again. It's a shame to hurt that face. Camila paused, then smiled, her eyes curving. All right. When I got back, the sky was already dark, and Julieta was still standing in the dim light, all alone. For some reason, seeing her like that reminded me of a deserted animal, but Julieta was never mine to begin with. I looked at her. After all this, Let's clear the air. Say whatever you need to say. It wasn't me who hit first today. Julieta was silent for a moment before blurting out the words. I hadn't expected Julieta to still be hung up on this. That doesn't matter. Get to the point. It does matter, Julieta insisted, staring at me stubbornly. Bruno, you never used to be so biased. The words used to be hung in the air. So long ago. People change over time. Besides, now, to me, Camila isn't someone else. You are. The sky was almost fully dark. The night was cold. Julieta stood there, repeating the word softly, as if tasting it on her tongue. Someone else. She lowered her eyes and forced a smile. When she spoke again, her voice was choked. A few days before your birthday, after school, I was with Santiago because he kept asking me to help him apologize to you. I knew you didn't like seeing him, so I didn't tell you. On your birthday, Santiago said he had already bought a birthday gift and invited a lot of people. He just wanted to apologize sincerely, so I helped him. All these years, I never had anything to do with Santiago. After finishing her explanation, Julieta looked up. Her eyes met mine, reflecting my image. She quietly waited for my response. Okay, I understand, I said, tightening my coat. Is that all? Then let's go home. It's cold. Julieta looked at me, her eyes suddenly welling up with tears. So you left without a word for all this time, and you have nothing to say to me? Chapter 19. It's pretty ironic, really. The issues Julieta talked about, I had thought about them many times late at night after I transferred schools. How could Julieta, who was so close to me, suddenly side with a guy she hadn't known for long? I never understood, and I couldn't forget Julieta, so I was frustrated for a long time. Julieta's presence seeped into every part of my life. I kept telling myself over and over that it was all in the past. It wasn't until I no longer cared that I finally got this weak, meaningless explanation. No, I looked at her. You've already explained everything. Julieta, let's end this here. I don't want to. Julieta suddenly stepped forward and threw herself into my arms. Her fingers tightened, and her voice trembled as she spoke. I could feel that Julieta was crying hard. She said, Bruno, after you transferred, I searched for you for so long. That day, I didn't expect the rain to be so heavy. All these years, I kept thinking, if only I hadn't made you pick up the cake, if only I hadn't agreed to Santiago's request, but you left so quickly, without giving me a chance to explain. I asked in return, was it me who didn't give you a chance? Julieta. Time and again, when did you not side with Santiago? Yes, these were all small things, but Julieta, you've always been smart. Could you really not tell if Santiago was lying or not? I'm sorry, it won't happen again. Julieta's voice was choked with emotion. Please don't avoid me anymore. That year, I searched for you in so many cities, but I could never find you. My chest felt cold and damp in the chilly wind. I had never imagined that someone as proud as Julieta could cry so miserably. She always liked to follow me, knowing that no matter what trouble she caused, I could easily solve it for her. Back then, I never thought there would be a day when Julieta and I would part ways. But reality taught me that relying too much on someone would eventually lead to a hard fall. I had fallen, and it hurt, a lot. It took me years to move on. I gently pushed Julieta away and whispered, this is the end. Julieta, don't come looking for me anymore. Julieta's eyes turned red, her face pale, her voice so dry and strained that she could barely speak. I turned and started walking away. I heard a faint, soft voice behind me. It was filled with pain and sorrow. She said, I can't. Chapter 20. After that, the Porsche no longer appeared near the company, but every morning, a florist would show up at the office to deliver flowers. Mr. Liu, these flowers were freshly picked. May you have a pleasant day. At noon, someone would bring lunch specifically for me. David came over. Isn't this from our favorite restaurant? It's insanely expensive. The restaurant staff smiled. Mr. Liu is one of our top VIPs. If you have any favorite ingredients, feel free to let us know anytime. And it wasn't just this restaurant. Every place I had visited had me listed as a VIP under my name. Even the mortgage on my current house had been paid off in advance by someone. Every single gesture. I didn't need to think hard to know who was behind it. Julieta, David said, his eyes wide as he struggled to find the words. She's really rich. I tried contacting her multiple times to return the money. Every time, Julieta sent it back. She said it was compensation for the guilt she felt from the past. The next time I saw Julieta was at the company's team-building camping trip. The boss mentioned that there would be a rare meteor shower tonight. The best view would be right where we were. The whole way there, David and Camila kept chatting non-stop, making my ears ache. We finally reached the destination, and things quieted down a bit. But of course, I spotted Julieta. She was standing not far away, in the wind, back to her usual cold and aloof demeanor that warned people to keep their distance. The Julieta who had cried with red eyes that night seemed like a dream. She looked over at me from a distance. She smiled and said, "What a coincidence." Camila, grilling skewers, sneered, "Miss Lou, that's a funny joke. Your company is miles away from here." "True," Julieta nodded, "but the branch office is nearby. When did you open a branch here?" Julieta responded calmly, "Just now." Camila rolled her eyes. Ridiculous. Julieta wasn't joking. Her branch office really was about to be established nearby, but claiming she was bringing employees for team building seemed a bit far-fetched. Among the group, I still spotted Santiago. However, he seemed more subdued, staring at Julieta but not approaching like before. Julieta came over to chat with the boss. The boss had always wanted to collaborate with Julieta's company, so he didn't refuse. As they talked, the conversation turned to the food supplies Julieta had brought. Julieta had been extravagant, bringing twice as many supplies as our company. Julieta seized the moment and suggested, "Why don't we join forces? It'll be more lively." The boss agreed happily. Camila scoffed. "Julieta is obviously here for Bruno." The boss knocked her on the head. "You think I don't know? It's free stuff, why not take advantage?" Camila handed the boss a burnt skewer. "Isn't that selling out?" The boss sighed. "Haven't you noticed? Bruno has already moved on." The two companies mingled, making the event more lively, but no matter what I was doing, Julieta would come over to help. She took the skewers from my hand, the oil sizzling, and asked, "How have you been lately?" I replied, "Everything's been fine." "That's good." As I chatted with Julieta, I could feel Santiago's gaze fixed on me. Later, he found a reason to come over and talk to me. I thought he had changed until the hot soup spilled on his hand. Just like 7 years ago. That's when I realized he hadn't grown at all. The noise drew everyone's attention. The people from both companies looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Santiago probably wanted to pull the same trick, trying to make my life difficult at the company. He had succeeded before. I never really fit in at class 3. But now, before I could say anything, David and Camila rushed over. "Seriously, you haven't had enough? Come on, if you're going to frame someone, at least pick the right setting. This is our company's turf. Do you really think you can mess with Bruno? And even if Bruno did it, you probably deserved it." Voices surrounded him from all sides. Things weren't going the way he imagined, and Santiago stood there frozen. His words stuck in his throat, his face darkened, and he turned to look at his own company. But Julieta stepped in front of him. She looked at Santiago, her voice as cold as ice. "Santiago, when we get back to the office, submit your resignation and move to another city." As soon as she said that, no one else spoke up for Santiago. All the color drained from Santiago's face. I grabbed a nearby bottle of cold water and poured it over his head. With a loud splash, the water soaked him. Santiago shivered violently. He looked up at me, disbelief in his eyes. I looked at Santiago and smiled, telling him, "This time, it really was me. You've been dying for me to pour something on you, so how could I not oblige?" Chapter 21. After a day of cold winds, we still didn't get to see the meteor shower. When Julieta went to get a scarf, the darkness around us was too thick, and she twisted her ankle after missing a step. She sat on the ground, her face pale. By the time I realized what had happened, Julieta had already grabbed my wrist. The mountain path was too rough for cars. Julieta's voice trembled with pain. "It hurts so much. Please help me." I sighed and finally carried her down the mountain. The night air was cold, and Julieta was in so much pain that a fine layer of sweat formed on her forehead. As she clung to my back, she asked, through her pain, if she was too heavy. Her voice was trembling, filled with the same kind of sadness and hurt as that night. For a moment, it merged with the voice of the younger Julieta, making me feel dazed. I said, "Not really." Julieta, trying to distract herself from the pain, talked about many things. She brought up a lot from our childhood, things I knew and things I didn't. She also asked if I remembered the watch she had given me before my birthday. I had never gotten around to asking how Julieta knew I liked that watch. Julieta laughed softly, saying she had noticed when I first looked at it and had been planning to get it for a long time. That watch, she said, was still carefully kept in her drawer. I felt a lump in my throat and kept my eyes on the dark path ahead, saying nothing. Julieta continued, telling me that on my birthday, when I walked into the rain without looking back, she was about to chase after me when she got a phone call. There was an emergency at home. She rushed back and was swamped with problems for the next few days. She had planned to find me and talk things over as soon as she was done. Back then, she wouldn't have done anything to make me mad, no matter what I said. But by the time she was free, I had suddenly disappeared. Her calls were blocked, and suddenly, she had no way to reach me. She thought I was throwing a tantrum, so she bought a cake and waited outside my house for a whole day and night. The cake melted into a mess, but the door never opened. Then one day, she saw someone at school handling my transfer paperwork. Julieta's mind went blank, and she realized something was seriously wrong. She ran out, she begged my aunt repeatedly. But in the end, my aunt never told her the exact address. Julieta let out a soft, bitter laugh as she recounted this. Her voice was filled with a mix of resentment and guilt. She said that I had transferred schools without saying a word, not even a goodbye. I kept my eyes down, unsure of what to say, and tried to change the subject, just like she had. I said, "Stop making me a VIP everywhere, and don't pay off my mortgage. I'll pay you back slowly." Julieta suddenly fell silent. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice rough. "Do you really not want to have anything to do with me?" I replied, "I don't want to owe anyone. The Liu family took care of me a lot back then. Let's call it even. No one owes anyone anything." Julieta shook her head, saying she didn't want that. The cold wind howled in my ears. I could hear Julieta's voice trembling. I sighed. After a moment of silence, I said, "In a little while, I'll be leaving this city to head up the branch office." Julieta, still on my back, suddenly stiffened. The wind was too cold. Julieta took a sharp breath, and her tears started falling again. Her voice mingled with the wind, each word accompanied by deep breaths. "You're leaving again?" I quietly replied, After that, Julieta didn't say another word. She stayed silent, not speaking again, but kept wiping away her tears. I took Julieta to the hospital, handling everything from start to finish. The hospital room was so quiet that only our breathing could be heard. Julieta lay on the bed, staring at me without moving. It was as if she was trying to etch my image into her mind. After what felt like a long time, she finally spoke, smiling as she asked, "When will you come back?" But that smile was painfully forced. I said, "Who knows? Maybe I will. If things go well, maybe I'll never come back." Julieta's eyelashes fluttered gently. Her eyes were filled with a sadness I had never seen before. "Then, will we ever see each other again?" I looked out the window and shook my head slightly. Probably not. As the words left my mouth, the light in Julieta's eyes was completely swallowed by the darkness. She lowered her head and cried for a long, long time. Finally, she managed to choke out a faint, "Okay." Chapter 22. The day I left the city, it snowed. The air was filled with a biting chill. I knew that Julieta was somewhere not far behind me. Dependence is a dangerous thing. I had fallen once and gotten badly hurt. When I chose to leave back then, I never intended for things to return to how they were. The idea of fixing a broken mirror is just too unrealistic. I would never throw myself back into the downpour of my teenage years. I held onto my suitcase. Step by step, I walked forward. I never looked back.